to finding Baba's presence within. Baba is out there, and why is it you admire him? If you see him, you read about him, you find out that he is this exceptional being in this way, he is this exceptional person in that way, in every way that you can think of. Why is it? Why do you admire that? He's not going to give you anything that your limited self wants. You know that. We all know that Baba's the one to take, not the one to give. Well, why does it you admire him? Do you know why you admire him? You are admiring him because that's what you really are. That perfection that you see in him, that seems so unattainable in yourself, is what you really are, and that's why you admire him. That's why you find him irresistible. That's why you have to find a way to remember him constantly. You will never be satisfied with anything else. No matter what it is you could achieve, great musicianship, great oratory, great scientific accomplishment, all that does is to deceive you. I would say that we've all been all of these things. Would you give up Baba for any one of these things? Great virtuosity. What does it mean? Virtuosity, if it's really virtuosity, what is virtuosity in art? Any art form. It's pointing to God. That's all. The greatest expression in science or art or any activity emanating from human endeavor, if it has eloquence, it's simply pointing to God. And you have him already. You have the clearest, we have the clearest understanding that a limited human being can have, that God in fact exists. I used to hear about these various accounts that Baba would not allow you to bow down to his feet. And I was thinking to myself one time, I feel as though a person must earn the right to bow down to the God-man. And what I think I meant by that, I hate this bouncing back and forth. What I think I meant by that was, I pictured the warrior that goes from lifetime to lifetime. He bears in his mind, his soul, his body, the scars of a struggle to reach something magnificent. And after he's gone through these many battles, that living in illusion is that. But when he's come to the place, when he has begun to see the purpose of life in some form, the greatness of the human being who rises above self, that noble warrior, when he comes to the God-man, he sees what is there to be seen. And he alone has the right to bow down to his feet. Well, this is the quest that all of us must go on. We have the key in our hands. The key is conviction. But you can have that key in your hand and never use it, or at least not use it for a long, long time. That is a tragic waste. The key must be used every moment. Baba wants us to be happy on the way to him. He wants us to make, you heard the expression, 99% of suffering. 99% of suffering is unnecessary. I understand that to be, we must make 99% of suffering in illusion unnecessary, and make only that remaining 1%. The remaining 1% that is left out is the 1% of suffering that's necessary for God. We put on our own shoulders the suffering that causes our lives to be empty and bleak, causes worry to mount up to monumental proportions. I'll tell you something else from my own experience. Every moment that you do not think of Baba, you are worrying. Every moment that you do not think about Baba, you are vulnerable to the pressures of life. You need to have that absolute armor. That's why the work is so necessary. This is not something that you're out there leaving all pleasure behind. On the contrary, this is a way to gain real pleasure, real serenity of mind. Doing that work, that's why I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled because I see it works. I simply try to find better ways to remember him, better ways to obey him. I sleep very little. The only relief I get during those long nights is to think about him. What we need to do, the reason we have to think about Baba every moment, creation, illusion is a jungle. Baba is that mighty oak tree. We must tie ourselves to that oak tree and give ourselves a very short rein. So when you remember Baba, you don't go too far into that jungle of illusion. That jungle of illusion will make you forget Baba. You'll get drawn into this trap, that trap, one after the other. And it's not an escape, my friends. The way you can deal best with whatever problem you have to deal with is to keep Baba in the front of your mind. Then, all those things that you've learned that Baba has taught us, you don't look for results. You do the best you can. You don't react to people. You've got to react to people if you're not remembering Baba. You must. You must be aware of those things you don't like in others if you're not remembering Baba. If you're feeling joyful, and this is the ultimate result of focusing on Baba. If you feel joyful, how can you make somebody else unhappy? You don't. You don't say disagreeable things. Even in a job like mine, where you're giving bad news to people all the time. You say it constructively. You say it tactfully. I thank God that I have that conviction about Baba, because it makes it more possible to do the kinds of things that normally would not be very pleasant to do. You have your own inner source. Your inner source of happiness is self-grounded. Baba simply wants you to focus on him because you can't find him within yourself. So he comes out and makes the most magnificent appearance on the stage of humanity. The life that is so supremely lived, that love unmixed with desire, that peace untroubled by ambition, that power unused except for others, all of these magnificent things that Baba said to describe the perfect life lived by the perfect man. I am a gauge against which you can measure what you are or where you are, but also what you can become. You know that discourse where he talks about the inferiority complex and the superiority complex. All of these things that Baba said. I once remember giving a talk out in California, and I was finally relieved to have given the talk and said things that I thought were important to say. And then I found out they wanted me to give another talk. And I was thinking to myself, my God, what else can I say? And I was really concerned about it. So I went back to my room, I picked up the discourses, and I read all about the ego. And after reading all about the ego, I realized that I had nothing to say. There was nothing to say. Everything comes from the ego. And then I realized, after going through that enormous despair, I realized much more fully and powerfully how much we need Baba. So that was my next talk. The point of the matter is that when we are motivated by those concerns which we normally associate with our egotistical selves, our false selves, we are very vulnerable, we are very fragile, we are very subject to being hurt, we're very thin-skinned. So consequently, for our own survival, it is absolutely necessary that we put Baba first. And the only way that you can do that is to remember him, remember Him, obey Him, and surrender to His will. What time am I supposed to be finished somehow?
3 minutes.
Another 3 minutes. May I read something to you that I think is very, very good? Would you like to hear, or would you rather I not read something?
Read something that is good for us.
All right, this was an answer to a request. There's an American who used to be Paul Brunton's secretary many years ago. He wrote me and asked me something about God Speaks, and I wrote him back and I said, I have to think about it. Well, I thought about it, and I said, Dear Lewis, the following is a comprehensive answer to your question. It expresses my feeling based upon my conviction that Baba is God, and as God, He is in all, as He stated many times. I hope you do find what I felt in this. Anything that man interprets is limited to man's understanding. Since God is perfect, He understands completely. Now, in order for man to understand what God interprets for man's level of understanding, God must use man's language. The perfect state of awareness, which is God, cannot be explained in man's terms. It can only be experienced as man's spiritual awareness increases. Man can intellectually interpret God's state of awareness, but man cannot understand, since the intellect must be balanced with love. It is not the mind alone that brings man to God. It is the perfect balance of mind and heart. The reason for creation is to give man the means to balance the mind and heart. Therefore, the birth of duality. Even though duality is not real. But God, beyond duality, had to give Himself the first experience in duality. God consciously and unconsciously experienced duality simultaneously. So in practical, intellectual terms, God is and always will be conscious of His own divinity at all times in creation and beyond creation. And beyond creation. So man must try to look beyond language and know there is infinitely more than even God's written words. The written words of God have their purpose. It is to help man keep his mind on God. But the real work is to love God 100%. That is the only way man should interpret any written explanations of perfection, even written by the God-man. Since God experienced creation consciously and unconsciously, He always experiences creation consciously and unconsciously, at all times and on all levels. It is God's conscious awareness of creation that keeps creation alive. Since God is infinite, so creation is infinite. Since God is aware of His own perfect state of awareness, He will always be aware of His own state of awareness. This cannot be explained in man's language. So God gave man something better. God embedded in man the great longing to be reunited with God. This is the unconscious awareness of God in man. Now, since man is the most conscious of all living creatures, and since he will embark on a road of great puzzlement about himself and creation, he will question all that happens to him. This questioning begins the long and tedious journey of the intellect. Now the journey becomes clouded with doubt, which brings forth the three basic negative forces in creation: fear, anger, and hatred. Man's inability to understand creation, Baba calls ignorance. Man's ability to understand creation, Baba calls awareness. Baba likens ignorance to the intellect and awareness to love. So to overcome ignorance, the intellect must be developed to its fullest. And in doing this, awareness transforms the intellect into love. This applies to all except those to whom Baba has given his grace. Those special ones were never satisfied with intellectual explanations. All are unconsciously aware of God at all times. It is the function of the intellect to carry this unconscious awareness of God through evolution and involution to the threshold of the spiritual planes. The threshold, Baba explains, as the spiritual path before the planes. So now you see how important the intellect is. But because it is ignorant, it must carry the burden of its ignorance until it is no longer ignorant. It has a heavy task. Although it has a heavy task, it will have a great reward. The reward is awareness. Even so, the reward is given in very small doses. The intellect continues to exist throughout the remainder of the spiritual journey of the soul until the soul is no longer aware of itself as separate from God. At this point, the soul experiences everything as God except itself. This means the soul is now at the threshold of the seventh plane. The soul must enter the seventh plane completely aware and completely stripped of all memories of the journey through creation. Now the unconscious God is what it always was: pure consciousness, unchanged consciousness, perfect knowledge, perfect power, and perfect bliss. So the avatar of the age, Meher Baba, tells us that God is in all things at all times, consciously and unconsciously. That God is experiencing himself as every speck of dust in creation, as every pig in creation, as every man in creation. Now at the same time, God is experiencing himself as the conscious God in all. He also experiences himself as the unconscious God, struggling to consciously realize himself as the conscious God he really is. Now you can see why it is impossible to explain God intellectually. So Baba created in all things the driving force of uniting with God. This simply means the conscious God gave, through his divine grace, the unconscious God the ability to love. That is the only way the soul can become one with God consciously. Love is the key. Since love is the only key, the difficulty arises when man tries to understand love. How many times have you heard or read, God is love? What this means is what you assume is God and what you assume is love are two separate things. That God is God, and as God he loves. When in reality, God and love are one and the same. It is the same to say love when referring to God or to say God when referring to love. So if God is love, and love is God, and God is in all, then love is in all. So all is God and all is love. And since nothing exists but God, then nothing exists but love. Now the work is to feel love and to feel God. The more you are aware of God, the more you are aware of love. The more you are aware of God love, the less you are aware of being separate from God love. So when any God man says, think of me, or follow me, I am the way, he is saying, love me, and love the me in all. So Baba tells us, I am the conscious God in all, at all times, and I am the unconscious God in all, at all times. Words are still words, but loving is divine. Thank you for your patience, Jay.